This is a normal Sunday thing, but Sunday I was very fluey and out of it. I'm still recovering from it, and I thought that I haven't dished out dose of medicine, of motivational medicine. So I thought, let's do it today on Tuesday, and it's actually interesting because what I want to motivate on, we can actually call it Truth Tuesday with Coco Dineo, because it's something that a lot of people have asked me to speak about, and it's Coco. How does one take upon the calling if their family members or their family are not supportive because of religious belief systems? So firstly, let's speak about the history of religion in Africa, in the continent. So the assumption is when we got colonized, because religion was one of the tools that was used to colonize us. And that's a fact, irrespective of whether we want to still remain religious, because there are two major religions in Africa, which is Christianity, because it's about 75 to 85% of people who are Christian, and then it's also Islam. But in the Southern African tip of Africa, it's mostly Christianity. So the assumption is when missionaries came into the continent, they assumed that we were non-believers. Actually, I don't think they assumed. They well knew that we were deeply immense in our faith and believe in divinity, which is Umvelinqangi, Umdali, uNkulunkulu, Mudimo, Zimo, one whom is divine spirit of creation, that has no body, has no color, has none of those things. It's not that white man sitting up there, heaven waiting to pass on judgment upon us, that all of us have to toe the line, otherwise we end up on the wrong side and not in his favor. So when we got colonized, we had everything that represent Africanness had to be demonized so that we can actually follow in the faith and belief system of the promised land, or this promise, heaven that we needed to go into. So that is one, historically, that what religion it has done. Some people had to convert in order for them to get access to resources, access to education. Some people actually were killed if they didn't want. We understand the whole history of slavery, and when people were taken into Africa and they were stripped off of their names, their identity, and they had to be called Roberts and Joshua's and all sorts of things. So religion has a very violent history, and that's a fact. But furthermore to religion, structures of oppression, institutions continued to make sure that as Africans we move away from everything that represented African greatness, African healing, African magic. And so there was legislation that was passed, and I've mentioned this before, that actually said, the Witchcraft Act that was passed, that said anybody seen consulting, conducting any acts of witchcraft, with the assumption, and I don't think it was a naive assumption, I think it was a calculated assumption, that African healers were seen as witch doctors or witches, and that's why post 1994, it was fought ukuthi we are not witch doctors, because thina umthakathi nomlaphi, those two things don't fit in one bracket. To be a healer and to be a destructor, you cannot be mending and bringing whole, and then at the same time causing harm and manipulating and having people be distracted by your very acts of trying to attempt healing. So there's a lot of things that were done that demonized African healing practices, which we are now sitting with the legacy of that, and that many of us who are called is to readdress some of the things that came with that demonization of African healing practices. Because by demonizing those healing practices, it moved us from our core identity, it moves us from rituals and things that had us be connected to our identity as Africans, such as connecting to Abaphansi, Badimu, Amadlozi, Abapasi, ancestors. So with that history, and we should also understand that the dangers of colonization were not just being put into physical chains, but were put into mental chains, which we still are living the impacts of mental slavery, because that's the most dangerous form of slavery, is to actually rob somebody of their own thinking and continuously feeding them theories and propaganda of how less of a human being they are in their own identity, that they can only be better or they can be seen as godly if they aspire to something outside of themselves. Hence, we are now sitting with families that when they are told or are informed that one of their own has to follow a path which reconnects them to an African identity, which history has demonized, which the current situation still demonized, because there's a lot of churches that still sees this act of African healing as something that's ungodly, which is an irony, because if you look at the whole, history of religion is actually texts and books that are talking about stories of people that do not exist in the physical realm, that they exist in the spiritual realm, because no one in any religious text, including the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, exist in the physical, which is what we also believe in, that in African spirituality, that our loved ones, when they pass on, their body dies, but their spirit then goes on to continue and be one with Umvelingangi, Mudimu, Uzimo, which is creator or God for some people. I always say I struggle with the term God because I see the colonial God and I see the God that continues saying the God that says, me connecting to my people, it's wrong. If you believe in a God that takes you away from the essence of your identity, that God is not for you. Because, if you are of God's children and there are ways and parts in which we connect to God, then God cannot remove us from those things. So that's why I needed to set that context. That's why that our families still today, because of religion, but also because of the continuous perpetuation of what African healing is that is not. And I've been speaking about that a lot. So what do you do if you've been called and then your family doesn't want anything to do with it? One is that if if you're young, it's very unfortunate, because if you are dependent on them in every essence, financially, that you still stay in their house, that you are underage. So underage in this country would be somebody under 18, I think. 21, it's very young. So you require your parents to sign off on things. So you cannot then just go to your twasa because your parents don't want you to do it. But also understand that if you understood your parents' narrative deeply, you'll also be empathetic to why they say no, because also, despite colonization, yes, people have done sinister things to each other in the families that have also led people move away from African practices, because instead of us using those healing practices for the family progression, some of us have used the powers that have been bestowed upon us as the custodians of the healing gifts. So those who've been gifted have used it to cause wrath in the family. So families also move away from it, because or to awaken that same gift might be awakening a family generational curse that people rather not have in their own family. So it's complex. It's not only religious, it's not only historical, it's not only colonial, but there could also be things in the family that awakening the gifts can be awakening dark sides of the calling. So it's very important for you to also understand why your family is not being supportive. But remember, you're the one who's been given this gift. So if you're an adult like me and you're old enough to make your own decisions, my encouragement would be act according to your own conviction. So your own conviction is what feels right for you, what will bring you to a place of peace, because right now you are in broken pieces and you cannot wait for everyone to be whole before you make yourself whole. So you self-prioritize you and say, what will bring me closer to being at peace with myself? What will bring me closer to be in alignment with myself, so I can be well within myself and I can be a functioning human being and I can be able to be of service? Because also remember, the calling is calling you back to your own wholeness of self. It's not only calling you to be of service to others. I always speak about that with an empty cup, you cannot fill anybody else's cup. With brokenness, you cannot heal anyone, because the whole act of going in Twasa, is to first mend the broken internal pieces within self. Secondly, is to mend the broken family pieces. Then is to understand with that how then am I supposed to be of service to the community in which I come from. How am I then supposed to be of service to the people that I'm supposed to be healing? So you need to do what is going to make you feel that uzopola, that you have to do what's going to make you feel that you're going to find healing. Because I, as well as Ukoko Dinewa, I cannot say to you, discard your family, discard everybody, and go take upon this calling, because you need to go into a self-introspection journey and say, this is what's going to serve me. And sometimes it requires taking risk, and sometimes your family is not being it's not being enrolled in this path at the particular time of you embarking on the journey, because you do not need any negativity, because you do not need people who are going to make you doubt what already is complex and you are trying to contemplate and make sense of. Because this calling thing, you are not working at a physical ether, you are working at a spiritual ether. So you are here with an education system that does not teach us to tap into the spirit and work with it and understand it and embrace it as it is, but it continuously asks us to question it, because we hear, and with the education system that says apply logic, 1 + 1 is to be 2, and now there's the calling 1 + 1 does not equate to 2. Here you are qualified but not able to get a job. Here you are looking all beautiful and a competent, compatible companion, but you're not finding companionship, because there is a calling that is asking you to pay attention to. So those are some of the things. At the end of the day, you need to make your own decisions, and you need to take the risk to do what's going to save you, what's going to heal you, what's going to make you happy, what's going to bring you closer to joy, what's going to bring you closer to wellness. Because when you've got a calling and you don't do anything about it, this is something you said yes to when you were spirit. You agreed to the terms and conditions, including the family, because once you say yes to it, you say yes to something much bigger than just so you're not only doing justice to you, doing justice to the collective. And sometimes the collective, because on its own, and what do I mean by the collective? I mean your family, the community which might not be supporting you, that they themselves are not intact, they are broken, so they cannot support something that they don't understand. They cannot support something from a place of their own brokenness, but it might require you to be a warrior in this moment and step in an act of courage and say, I'm gonna do this for myself, and by once saving myself, I'll understand how it can serve my family. And maybe the old has to die, and sometimes the old having to die, it means we're walking on a path that many might not celebrate with us, and that many might not understand, but you need to understand it for yourself, then you can enroll everybody else. Because by a call, it's very unfortunate and sad, because when uthwasa awuthwasi idlozi lakho kuphela, uthwasa idlozi lakini, uthwasa abantu bakini. So you are actually helping the families mend the family broken pieces. So it's very unfortunate, but maybe that's what you need, in order for you to be fully immense and focused, because you don't need any kind of distraction, and your current family dynamics are going to be a distractor versus something that's going to enable you to move forward. So this might not be good. Gogo has given me the magic pill, but I've given you a motivation to prioritize you, do you, be you, because only you can be yourself and nobody else can do that for you. Only you can walk a path that you have agreed to in the spirit world that you will walk. Nobody else can walk for you, because irrespective of your family support, at the end of the day, you need to cultivate self-inner strength to pull through it. Because you can have all the monies, but to pull through this journey, you have to say, mina, I will do it, I will make it. Is to say ngizoyenza, ngizozimisela, because at the end of the day, lento le ibhekane nawe. It's connected to everybody else, the family, the community, but ibhekana nawe wena obiziwe. So you need to take the necessary steps that you need to take in order for you to be well within self. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who's not at ease with your life. So do whatever that you need to do to make sure that you are disease free and you are whole and complete and at peace with yourself. Thokozani, I'll see you Sunday.